All right. So this is something that I found, I think yesterday or day before yesterday. It's called Privacy Badger. It is definitely not Linux specific. It applies to both Chrome and also Firefox. So if you use one of these two browsers, you can install this. It's still in alpha stage, so if you don't feel comfortable with software that is still in alpha stage, not even beta stage, don't install it. It's not quite ready for prime time. I have not had a problem with this yet, and it's kind of interesting. So you can go through the FAQs and find out what it is and how it is developed. It is not a program or project started from scratch. It is actually based on AdBlock Plus, if I remember correctly. So it shares the code base with AdBlock, but on top of that, they added some additional features to this particular ad blocker. I have this installed on my browser. I'm not logged into my Google account, and that's why it's not automatically showing up here. But it's basically just an add-on. It allows you to specify what a website can track and what a website cannot track. It shows you all the tracking done by a particular web page, and you can turn on and turn off individual items. Gives you a lot of control. It's not really intended for end users, so I will not push it to regular end users using a particular system. But if you know what you're doing and you understand the terms, this is really quite a useful tool to basically stop websites from tracking you. Okay, so this is probably a good introduction to get into the ethical issues of computer security and also privacy. Security is not so big of a concern. Okay, if someone is taking your data without your consent, it's basically stealing. Okay, and that's bad. Okay, that's pretty easy to understand. But what about privacy? Okay, privacy is kind of more in the gray area. What do you think people can do when you're browsing online? Okay, I'll just give you an example. Okay, most of you would say that, well, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with doing this. So I'm just going to a website to check the weather. Okay, I go to weather.com and type in the area code and check the weather and see what is going to be the forecast for tomorrow. And I click on these links here to watch the videos and whatnot. Okay, fairly typical stuff that people do on a daily basis, on an hourly basis even. Okay, so what can potentially be tracked when I'm going to weather.com? Okay, and how do they do it? How do they do all this tracking? The zip code that I type in, but there are specific things related to HTML and also HTTP that allows all this tracking to happen. Okay, so each image that we are seeing here, these are all images here. Each image is actually requiring a separate connection to the server. And these images are not necessarily coming from weather.com. They can coming in from a variety of websites. So let me just do an experiment right now. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I will go to settings. I go to show advanced setting. Go to privacy, and I'm going to clear all my browser data. Okay. I'm going to clear my history, download history, cookies and other site and plugin data, cache, password, autofill. Okay, I'm going to erase everything there is, and since the beginning of time. Well, as far as the browser is concerned. Okay, clear browsing data. I'm clearing everything. Okay, now I go back to weather.com and refresh this page, and it has not lost my zip code, and that's because the zip code is actually a part of the URL itself. It is not stored in a cookie. So the big question is, just by reloading this page, how many cookies have I set or stored in my system, and what do they do, and also how can the companies, various companies, possibly track this particular computer for my browsing habits using all those cookies. So I'm going to switch back to settings. And what I'll do is I will go to content settings. There's a place where you can look at all the cookies, manage exceptions, all cookies and site data. Okay, so I'm looking at this, and all of these cookies were set when I refreshed the page because I erased everything. And then all I did is to reload one single web page. And I have all of these cookies set as a result of that. Okay, when you look at these cookies, how many of these were coming from weather.com? None on this page. Keep scrolling. I only got 6 cookies, coming from weather.com. All of the other cookies come from somewhere else. Okay. Yahoo. We have some from Yahoo. We have Question Market. We have Mookie1. We have Insight Expressi, IMR World, Google.com. And then we have AD Advisor, Ad Advisor, and so on. Blue Kai, and all of these companies that we typically do not, go to, but yet they're setting cookies. So now the first question is, how did all these cookies get set in my browser when I'm just going to one single web page at weather.com? It has to do with the images. Okay, so the images, by loading the images, the connection to get the images basically trigger the installation or the downloading of these cookies. Okay, it's not anything that I do. Okay, I just reloaded the page and that's all I did. But by just going to the pictures, by downloading the pictures, I'm triggering a lot of these cookies to be set on my computer, and they're not even coming from weather.com. The second question is, what can these cookies possibly do? So let's go ahead and see if I can take a look at one of those. Okay, and okay, there we go. So the name of the cookie in this case is AB. The content is some gibberish here. At least it's gibberish to us. Okay, it's gibberish to us. The domain that set this cookie is advisor.net. The path is / and send for any kind of connection. Now, what does a cookie do? How many people know HTTP well enough to tell me what cookies actually do? Okay, what this is saying is every time I make another connection to advisor.net, this cookie is sent back. Okay, it is a token that is stored on my computer right now. But every time I make a connection to advisor, this cookie, this ID, this content, and also this name is sent back to basically say, you know what, this particular cookie called AB with this content is stored on this computer. In other words, it is a way for this particular website advisor to keep track of where I have been. Okay, to basically say that, oh, I can see that you're coming back to our website now. Okay, and you can also see the expiration date is set here. It is created on Tuesday, and it is going to expire in 1 year. So if I don't do a single thing about it, this cookie will stay on this computer for 1 year before the browser automatically delete that particular cookie. Okay, what kind of bad things can a cookie do? Not a whole lot. Okay, it is not an infection of any kind, and it is not quote unquote actively tracking you. It's not a keylogger of any kind. It's not spyware. It is really just a way so that that particular website can track you whenever you make a connection back to it. Okay. When you look at the other cookies, it's about the same. So when you look at Blue Kai, it has set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cookies, and if you click on one, it will show you, the name is this, the content is that, and the path is important because the path is basically saying every time we make another connection back to that website to load an image, probably, this cookie gets sent back to it. Okay, so going to one single web page, sending all these cookies is not particularly a bad thing. But what if I go to another website? Let's say I go to, say, abc.com. Now, when you go to abc.com, some additional cookies will be set. And also, when you go to abc.com, the home page, some of these web pages or some of these images will also be triggered. Now, when that happens, they can associate your browsing habit. because they can see that sometimes you go to weather.com and then you go to abc.com. They can track that information. Am I making any sense?
Yes.
Okay. So when these websites, like Blue Kai and whatnot, these are mostly advertisement companies or companies that try to track browsing habits. When more and more websites, start to allow images coming from these, particular websites, they now have a more complete picture of how you use your browser and how you go about, browsing on the internet. Because now they can gather information and put everything together. Because by setting these cookies, they are basically leaving traces and say, oh, I can see that you have been go to this site already. And by going to abc.com, the same cookie gets sent back to bluekai.com. They know that, oh, you are the same person or the same browser or the same session that visited weather.com a little bit earlier. And that's how they can track stuff. Am I making any sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. So what if on top of this, I sign into Facebook? Well, after I sign into Facebook, Facebook will also place its own cookies on this browser, because in that case, a cookie is required to keep that session. In other words, it has to know that I have logged into Facebook. Okay, so a cookie is used, just for that purpose, is to say that I have signed in, I have authenticated as a particular user on Facebook. But that also allows, more information to be collected, because now they can actually put, a face to a cookie. No pun intended. Okay, so the more account you sign in to Amazon, okay, to Facebook, to Google, and so on, and you go to other pages, they can now start to not only keep track of your sessions, of where you have been to, they also know who you are.
Wow. Big brother.
Well, this is worse than this is commercial. Okay, this is not the government doing it. This is commercial companies doing it, so that they can keep an eye on your browsing habit, and for the most part they want to pop up the right kind of ad, so that you can click on the ad and they can collect money from whoever is paying for that space for advertisement. But nonetheless, it relates to what we want to talk about today, which is privacy, the law, and ethics. Okay, so is this ethical?
No.
Why is it not ethical?
It's collecting information from us that we did not willingly, that we were not prompted to.
Knowingly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So the part that is not so ethical about this is not that they're collecting data. If they ask you up front and say, can we collect some data about your browsing habit? And you say, yes. Are you sure? Yes. Are you really, really sure? Don't ask me anymore. Yes. Okay? Then it's one thing, and say that, yes, I freely and willingly want to participate in, your marketing campaign or whatnot. It is another thing when they do this and you don't know a single thing about it. They do not, on the web page, they don't say anything about, yes, we have cookies that might collect some of your personal data or your browsing habit at least. Okay, they can collect at least that much information about your browsing habit, but they don't say anything at all. It's like silence. Okay, so what we want to do, or what I want to do, is to install Privacy Badger, which is a tool that can be used to basically control what they can collect and what they cannot collect.
Is that a FOSS program? Is that a FOSS program?
It is a EFF program, which is closely related to FOSS. It is EFF is Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Ooh.
It is the foundation of your hero, Mr. Stallman.
Yeah. Like a new lord.
So I'm going to add this to my browser, and it now has been added to Chrome. So I go back to weather.com, and you can see that there's a little new icon here. It says Privacy Badger. Now Privacy Badger is based on AdBlock Plus, which means if you install AdBlock Plus, it has a similar functionality where you can stop certain types of ads. But when I click this now, okay, let me just reload the page first to make sure that Privacy Badger has everything loaded. So now it can list all of these websites, okay, and basically say, do we want to enable this website to collect information? This domain is unblocked, slide blocked to entirely blocked or partially blocked. So with each website, you can slide it to a middle point, and it says the cookies are blocked, and then you can slide another one to basically the tracker is blocked. So there's a tracker and there's a cookie, and they are independent. You have the tracker, which is usually web script enabled. They can put JavaScript into the browser to do certain things, and then there's also the cookie where they can also use that to track you. Okay. Are there any questions about privacy and how just going to a single website or a few websites can have basically companies start to collect information about you and also your browsing habits? No questions? Okay. What about that YouTube video that you watched earlier? Okay, just by going to YouTube and watch a video, what can possibly happen? If you turn off cookies altogether in the browser, can they still collect information about you?
Yes.
Yes, because Flash itself can set the same thing as a cookie, or what is equivalent to a cookie. So you have to be careful, if you want to watch, what kind of information can be collected about you and your habit. Yep.
There's a website that allows you to insert the URL of a video so that you can download the video. Would that website prevent the Flash program in YouTube from obtaining information?
Well, that's a good question. Okay, let me just kind of rephrase that to the whole class.
Yeah.
There's a program like FlashGod can do it too. You can point a URL and they can download the Flash video itself. It is the player of a Flash content that basically triggers the cookie to be sent back to a certain website. Yep.
Okay. So if we have Flash disabled and we go to YouTube and we want to download a video,
it depends on which player you use to watch it.
okay.
So you can basically look at Flash, video, cookie, and that should be enough. So Adobe Flash Player, Setting Manager. Let's see. Delete Flash cookie to protect online privacy. So you can basically do some research and find out, how Flash cookies can be at least disabled. I believe VLC is probably your best bet, because VLC is fairly good with protecting your privacy. In fact, you can probably just look for VLC here. Official page.
It's FOSS too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. VLC is open sourced. It doesn't say anything about cookies. But that's one thing that you also have to kind of keep an eye on is privacy. When you go online, what can they collect? What kind of data can they collect about your browsing habit? There are also different types of cookies. There are first-party cookies and then third-party cookies. The difference is with a first-party cookie, if I set your cookie, let's say moodle.lostreels.edu set a cookie on your computer. In the case of a first-party cookie, that cookie can only be sent back to me at moodle.lostreels.edu, which is okay because guess what? You just signed into my server, to get access to the class, information, homework assignments, and whatnot. So it's perfectly reasonable that I might collect information about your browsing habit and so on and so forth. In fact, I need that cookie to maintain the session. If you try to set up your browser not to allow cookies coming from Moodle, you would not be able to sign into the website, period. Okay, so you need that cookie. But what third-party cookies can do is far worse. Because what a third-party cookie means is, let's say, weather.com can put a cookie inside your browser. But as a third-party cookie, that cookie can be sent back to websites other than weather.com itself. So now other websites can also see the same cookie and basically say, okay, I can see that you have a cookie called blah 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 that is coming from and from the information of the cookie itself, they can basically correlate and find out how that cookie got set in the first place. So when ABC, weather.com, and all of these websites basically collect all the data and share, they can now have a fairly complete picture of your browsing habit, which is not going to be good. Okay. Are there any questions? Yep.
Let's say, for instance, that we log into our email through our browser instead of a program like Thunderbird.
Right.
Would the email service client be able to pick up all of our cookies to attach them to a profile?
It depends on whether those are
address?
third-party cookies or not. Okay, so let me go back here. And the way I set up the cookies, this is the default, by the way, of Google Chrome, is allow local data to be set, and it does not seem to have anything to control whether only first-party cookie can be set. Manage.
Lock third party.
Okay, block third-party cookies and site data. It is not enabled by default. So that's basically allow a cookie to be set by one website, but it can be sent back to any number of websites. And those are the worst kind of cookies that can be set because it allows not only the originating website to track you, but it also allows other websites to use the same cookie to track you. Okay. Are there any questions? Now, if you have any questions about third-party cookies, you can just kind of look it up because it's a fairly common topic that people use. People will look up third-party cookies, and there are different types of explanation. So you can look up Mozilla Firefox. Third-party cookies are cookies that are set by websites by a website other than the one that you are currently on. Okay. For example, CNN.com might have a Facebook like button on their site. That like button will set a cookie that can be read by Facebook. That would be considered a third-party cookie. So you can kind of read about the details of these cookies. And on certain websites, if you disable third-party cookies, it won't work. So you cannot just universally turn off third-party cookies. You have to do it kind of selectively and say on these websites, I want to disable these cookies, but allow these to be set. You can set up exception rules based on allow and disallow in Google Chrome. Okay. Yep.
If we're Linux users, can we create a script that eats our cookies, like a Cookie Monster script that runs every hour or something like that?
To do what? To destroy the cookies?
Yeah.
You can write your own script to do it. I mean, you can also disallow the use of cookies too, because the setting in Chrome, gives you a lot of control over cookies. Because what you can do is you can select block sites from setting any data, and then only on websites that you actually go to and you know about, then you can manage exceptions. In other words, you can specify, oh, okay, I'm going to block all cookies except for Moodle. So you can now say Moodle or whatever at let's see. Okay, this means the first part does not matter. So whatever is coming from losrios.edu, I would allow, all the cookies to be set. Okay, so by doing this, you are specifically only allowing certain domains to set cookies on your browser, but for everything else, it's going to block it. Now, it will work really well if your browsing habit is only going to certain websites, but if you have to do research online and you have to go to a gazillion different websites, then you end up with, you can end up with some kind of tedious issues because now you have to selectively say yes, no, yes, no. There are plugins in most browsers that will give you control over cookies also. So you can go to a web page and there's an icon, about at this place here, and you can click it and it will tell you, about all the cookies that the website wants to set, and then you can say at that point, allow, disallow, and stuff like that. But the awareness of cookies is important. Okay. So, but since I destroyed all my cookies, this session is probably over by now. Okay, so if I do a restart here, you can see that I'm no longer logged in. So I have to log in again in order to reestablish a session. So cookies by themselves are not really particularly evil. They are actually necessary in order for websites to function. It's just that with third-party cookies, they can track information about you, and you don't even know about it for the most part. The same thing applies when you read an email message, let's say from gmail.com or from yahoo.com, and in the email, if it is an HTML document and it includes pictures, just by viewing the picture, you might be allowing the browser to set a cookie to basically say, well, this email got sent to this person, and that person actually read the email. It can at least do that much. Am I making any sense? In other words, every time an advertisement agency, let's say Costco, okay, send me an advertisement and say, oh, tag, we have these good deals, blah 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 blah, okay. Just by me opening up the email and viewing the images inside the email message, that can send an information back to the Costco server to basically say that, oh, tag actually opened up this email and is reading it. Unless I turn off cookies to Costco.com, then they cannot see the cookie that's coming back. So they can, but they still collect a lot of they can still collect a lot of information because they know my IP address already, and from that they can also kind of associate it with my past login, to say, oh, okay, this IP address does match in the past when tag logged into his Costco account. So they can still collect that information. All right. So now the question is, how much privacy do you expect when you go online and do your browsing and do all the stuff that you do online? Not much. Okay, that's not a bad answer. Do not expect much, because there really is not much. What about those Google documents that you have been typing? Can you expect any type of privacy with that? Well, you can expect privacy from other people, but you cannot expect privacy from Google.com itself, or any affiliated company with Google. What about your Android system? Your phone that is running Android. What can they do to collect your information when you use your mobile device? Well, depending on how you set it up, they can collect quite a bit of information. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and take a look at a phone and talk about privacy that applies to a phone. My phone, I'm not doing anything with my phone right now. It is on, okay? It is on the network. It is on. It can receive phone calls right now, okay? So right now, T-Mobile can be collecting information about me already. What can they possibly collect about me at this point?
Where you are?
Where I am, exactly. Okay, so even though I'm not doing a single thing with my phone, they can know where I am. But I turned off GPS already. How can they possibly do anything about collecting my location?
Cell tower.
Cell tower, and they use triangulation, so they can already collect the location of where I am. Now, how does that relate to the law? And
It's the same history. So, for example, can they still check where I was?
say again?
Can they check where I was?
In theory, they can. Okay, in theory, as long as you have your phone turned on and it is on the network. I'm not talking about the mobile network. I'm just talking about the cell phone network. So it applies not only to smartphones, but also to basically any type of cell phone. If your cell phone is capable of receiving a call, they can track where you are.
What about history?
Your history, if they don't have the tracking turned on, they cannot go back in time to find out where you were. But I think all carriers are now required by law to keep track of that information. Now, the question, how do I know that? I had the honor of becoming a backup juror, I think year before last, okay? And that's one of the worst thing, or one of the bad things that can happen is not to become an actual juror, but as a standby. There's a name for that.
This is basically standby juror.
Yeah, it's a standby juror, but there's a fancy name for that. Alternate, that's it. Yeah, alternate juror. Because you get to, go to all the hearings, you have to stay awake the entire time, but you don't get to participate in the deliberation. So you cannot say a single thing about what you think, because what you think does not matter. until they have one juror who has to basically say, I cannot do this anymore. Then you have to step in to become an actual juror. But anyway, in the case that I was in, there was a home invasion and kidnap and stuff like that. And they were able to establish the location of that person using the cell phone. So they were basically using the cell tower. So not exactly the location as in, okay, this is where I am, but they were able to use the cell tower that was active at the time to at least establish, the general location of where that person was at the time, where, the crime happened. Okay, so they can at least collect that much information. Now, whether they can use triangulation to quote-unquote pinpoint your location, that's a different story. But they log at least which tower was in contact with your phone, all the time.
Okay, so what about if you use data over VPN?
What if you use what?
Data, like 4G data.
Same thing. Because your 4G data has to go to a cell tower as well, and they know which cell tower you are using at the time.
I see. So it's everything about GPS, but
Has nothing to do with GPS. You can turn off GPS and they can still know, where you are. Maybe not with like super duper precision, but they know generally where you are at any time. The only way to get around that one is to use a directional antenna. So you're intentionally not using a close-by cell tower, and you're using a directional antenna to talk to another cell tower that is further away. So you can basically say, oh, well, I'm over there, but you're actually over here because you're talking to a cell tower that is not local to you. Then you'll be carrying that antenna around with you, and it has to keep pointing to a certain direction all the time.
an accessory, you can use SAP, like voice over IP.
You can use voice over IP. If you use voice over IP, you still need to have an internet connection. So whoever you use an internet connection with, let's say our own school network here, that can log where you are. So it's pretty hard to become anonymous anymore. There are projects that can give you some tools to do that, like Tor, but Tor is not really practical because it is way too slow for any real practical purpose. For those of you who want to know what Tor is, you just look up Tor.
Yeah.
It's basically allows you
But
to.
it doesn't really work because for your provider, they still can see what address you connected to.
Correct. Yep. But they can only track you, for a few hops. So it depends on how many hops you go through in order to try to hide your point of origin. Okay, so getting back to my webpage here, we are now talking about. Okay, it's not there. Okay, security, privacy, ethics, and the law. This is in topic 9. This is basically we are starting to get into this one, and I'm using privacy as an entry point to start to talk about this. Okay, other issues. How about the legality of rooting your phone, or in the case of iPods or iPhones, jailbreaking? Is that a violation of the law?
Violation of warranty. I'd say a violation of their warranty.
It voids your warranty, but how about the contract with your provider?
Probably.
I think the rooting of the device does not count. They did make one thing illegal. You cannot unlock your phone anymore without without going through your provider, your service provider or your carrier. Okay, there's a difference between unlocking and rooting. Okay, rooting your phone simply means that you have the ability to install an alternative version of the operating system. That's rooting your phone. Unlocking your phone, on the other hand, means that you can now use a SIM card that is coming from a different service provider. So that's typically what people do when they travel overseas. Because if I go to Hong Kong, for instance, okay, I probably don't want to use T-Mobile roaming because that's going to rack up the bill, in no time. So I want to go to Hong Kong, go to a 7-Eleven, and buy a SIM card locally, so I can get to the local data network and also voice network. But in order to make that SIM card, in order to use that SIM card on my phone, I have to unlock my phone first, because otherwise it is quote unquote locked to the T-Mobile network. Okay, so that's unlocking. I think the law has changed to basically outlaw unlocking by anyone other than your carrier. Yep.
For international use, most of the carriers actually always unlock for that because they know they can't get new coverage overseas very well.
Okay.
Verizon, all their 4G phones are automatically unlocked. Any of the global phones are automatically unlocked.
All the global phones, but if you buy a phone that is not intended for global,
their older global phones weren't unlocked for that. You have to get them unlocked from the carrier. The 4Gs are automatic. You just put in a new SIM card.
Okay, all right, that's good to know.
Only overseas.
Only overseas, only phones that are intended for overseas.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. All right. So what we'll do is we will now kind of focus on the first part here, and we'll start with the law and see what is applicable to online security, computers, and computer related crimes. Okay. Let's take a look at different scenarios. At work, okay, I'm assuming that most of us here have work, and we have to go to work, and we have access to computers at work. So when Joe is at work, can his or her employer use means to see what Joe is doing on the computer? That's the question. Can they install software to basically view and potentially take over the computer when that computer is in use? And the answer is yes. The employer has a right to do that. Okay. Oops, sorry. I thought I turned off the ringer already. Come on, turn it off. Okay. So the answer is yes, or assume it is yes, because if Joe is using company time and company equipment, the company basically does not need to guarantee any type of privacy at all. And that's pretty common sense. How many of you know people who would go to work and then they use the computer at work to go to all kinds of different websites? Some people just go to kind of more or less benign websites like eBay and just shop for certain items, and other people go to gambling websites, porn sites, and other type of more questionable websites. And how many of you know people who do that? Okay, and that's that's an invitation to get fired. Okay, because the employer can collect that information easily. They can they basically collect all the evidence, take screenshots. They know exactly what time, what computer, what website, and when they need to use the information, they have everything available to basically fire an employee for good cause in this case. The next question is, can Joe's employer read Joe's work email? Now, since it's work email, it kind of goes without saying, right? The answer is obviously yes. What if Joe wants to read an online magazine that has nothing to do with work, and Joe does not want to get fired or demoted? Well, he or she only has to do it, in after hour, not using company equipment. Okay. Question?
Or he needs to purchase a VPN.
VPN, yes, or SSH. SSH is the easiest way to do it, because you can use a port forwarding, and it's or just use a cell phone. Okay, use a cell phone, and if it's not a company cell phone, they cannot do anything with the cell phone. If Joe writes a program that destroyed data of value to Joe's employer, can Joe be charged with a crime? It is not unlike burning down the company building. Okay, so the same law applies, because it is something that is of value to the employer. So anything, it doesn't have to be physical. If it is just data, it is still the same. Okay, it is still a crime, and someone can get sent to jail because of that. And I think what if the data is not destroyed? What if Joe just used GPG to encrypt the entire database and say, okay, I'm quitting my job today.
It's still a crime.
It is still a crime, and the court can require Joe to produce that key to unlock the data.
Yes, and after that, yeah, they will put him to the prison.
Yep.
So what's the point to provide?
Okay, what about hacking? So we now talk about Pat. So the question now is, can a particular person, let's say Pat, legally try different things with a certain website and see what happens when a query is not formed as intended? Now there are tools that can help people do this sort of thing. So the question is, is that considered a crime? Is it legal or illegal to do that? Now I can give you some examples, okay? Try to log into wellsfargo.com. Now you can use various types of browser extensions to take a look at not only the get URL, but also the post data. In other words, you can basically decipher what is being sent between the client computer and the remote computer, okay? So the question is, if someone can kind of look at that, can that person start to change what is being posted to the Wells Fargo server? And would that count as computer crime?
Yes. Computer crime.
Now, is it a crime only if that person used the technique to illegally transfer money, or is it only a crime? Is it a crime already just by the attempt to do that?
I believe it's illegal by the attempt, some level of
Okay, so this is actually kind of muddy. Okay, in other words, there's no definitive definition of what is considered a crime and what is not. So even if no damage is done and the access is unauthorized, the attempt to test the system for vulnerability is considered criminal, can be considered criminal. The key is whether the court finds the action of malicious content. So the key is intent. Okay, can the prosecutor establish the intent is for profit or malicious, or is it just curiosity? Okay. A lot also depends on the website being quote unquote tested. If it is wellsfargo.com, I think in that case it's pretty clear cut, okay, because it's a bank website. On the other hand, if it's moodle.losreals.edu, I mean, you can kind of argue and say that the student is curious, okay. I want to see, what is being passed, from, my browser to the website, and I want to see what happens when I change this field to something else. Okay, can I see the content of a different class or class that I'm not enrolled in, just by passing a different ID to the course ID? Would that be considered a crime? Can it be of malicious content? Well, maybe, maybe not. But it is muddy, okay? In the case of Moodle, it is muddy because there's no money to be made, okay? So the only thing that someone can do is to gain access to a course that person is not enrolled in, or possibly log into someone else's account, okay? So that is the extent of what they can do with moodle.losreals.edu. But it can still get someone into trouble, okay? But in the case of wellsfargo.com, it's kind of clear cut. I mean, they can nail that person. Basically say the implied intent is to break into the website, for to have a monetary gain or something similar to that. Okay, so let's say it's the opposite. Okay, Pat is not hacking a website. Instead, Pat's computer is hacked. So the question is, can Pat go to the local police department and ask for help and say, well, I got hacked, what should I do now?
And nothing's gonna happen.
It depends on your local police department, because with some cities and towns, they have enough expertise in the police department. If they start to see a pattern, they can do something about it. But a lot of police departments don't have the resources or the expertise to do anything about it. They just go like, well, I can't do a single thing about it. I think Rancho Cordova Police Department actually has a cybercrime division. So they may or may not be able to do something for individuals. But if they start to see a pattern, they can certainly possibly do something about it. So the answer is, Pat can report it. It is kind of doubtful, at least today, it is doubtful of how much help Pat can get from the local police department. And the worst part is the person who's performing the hacking is most likely not even in this country. So the local police department really can't do anything about it, except to say that, well, this is out of our jurisdiction. There's not much we can do about it, except, well, install an antivirus checker, or, and install a virus checker, and that's the end of it. Right? Okay, so now we move into something that's even more kind of murky, in terms of privacy. If the police has a search warrant and got Sam's computer, does Sam have to disclose the password to decrypt his, personal, to decrypt any type of file or partition that is encrypted? Well, it's kind of muddy. Okay, I found some kind of conflicting information about this. Okay. So the first thing, is most people would quote the Fifth Amendment. Okay, so let's take a look at the Fifth Amendment and see what it has to say. Okay, so Fifth Amendment. And remember, when these amendments were written, it's well before computer, or networking became, a big thing. So we want to take a look at, what the Fifth Amendment is guaranteeing its citizens. The amendment requires that felonies be tried only upon indictment by a grand jury. And the key process, or the key point here, is people are not allowed, they're not required to answer questions if they think the answer to the question can be self-incriminating. Okay, so that's the bottom line. So the question is, going back to what we are talking about here, so the question is, where is it? Right here. So the question is providing the key to encrypted files or partitions self-incriminating? Well, but if they already know what's in it, they won't ask you for the for the key, right? So now the question is, okay, so let's say they got Sam's computer, and Sam's computer has an encrypted hard drive. Okay, so they can get the computer, they can see that it's Linux based, and they can see the home folder is encrypted. So now, can Sam be required by law to provide the decryption key to decipher the partition?
No. I can tell you, for example, I can give you an example with federal investigators. So they will ask you a password for computer, but you may provide, you may not provide. So you can say, I forgot. So we will take care of it. And after they will send your hard drive to Microsoft to decrypt it using BitLocker. So basically that's how it works.
Okay. Now there is also a second thing, besides the Fifth Amendment, there's also another thing. It's called a foregone conclusion. So using the foregone conclusion doctrine, Sam probably need to hire a team of good lawyers, because if you look at this term here, the foregone conclusion doctrine, it's an exception, and what it does is it's basically saying it is already conclusive of Sam's crime. So in that case Sam is required to disclose the password, because it is already kind of it's almost a done deal already. It is not really in question anymore. So for most of this stuff, you probably want to ask a real lawyer. If any one of you ever run into these kind of problems, don't ask me. Go borrow some money and find a real lawyer to help you out with these things. I'm hoping that none of you actually will get into trouble, that requires this kind of expertise. Okay, but it is questionable. Okay, whether the law can require you to disclose your password is questionable. Okay, it depends on the circumstances. And if someone is asked, and it's legal to ask for the password, and that person does not disclose the password, it can basically get additional jail time because of that.
Right. It will also give you additional time to to run.
Yep. And I'm just looking at this part here. This one is actually closely related to what we are talking about here. Okay, let me just kind of read this part here. Okay, in the case, the IRS conducted a tax evasion and false declaration in the investigation of attorney Nolan, who was represented by an attorney in the matter. So an attorney was represented by another attorney. As part of that investigation, the IRS learned that her income tax preparer had given the tax records to Nolan's civil attorney. The records, which pertained to 2 tax years under inquiry, measured 66 inches of papers if stacked. When contacted, the civil attorney indicated that the records had been transferred to a criminal attorney. The agency issued an administrative summons to obtain the evidence requesting these particular items. The criminal attorney resisted, contending that doing so would violate the client taxpayer's Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The agency sought to enforce the summons in the district court. So if you read this part here, the enforcing agency, the IRS, basically said that the summonized document fell into the foregone conclusion exception to the Fifth Amendment. In other words, there is a quote-unquote loophole of the Fifth Amendment, which basically invoke a certain exception and say that this does not apply. The Fifth Amendment does not apply in this particular case. It is an exception. The attorney appealed to the Ninth Court, arguing that the exception did not apply because producing the document would tacitly concede the existence of the papers demanded and the possession by the taxpayer, and so on. So it's kind of muddy. Okay, it definitely is not. It's not a clear-cut case. And by the way, can a police, officer just kind of knock on your door and come in and say, I need to confiscate your computer right now?
If you don't say no, they can. If you don't say no, they can.
Under what circumstances do you have to comply and say that, yes, here's my computer?
Well, I was just saying, if you waive your right, if you allow them to do it, then yes.
Right.
But otherwise, there has to be immediate threat, something like.
They need to have a search warrant.
Or if he witnesses it, if this so happens he sees it.
Right. If the police officer. Yep. And who can issue a search warrant? The judge, exactly. And which branch does the judge belong to, and which branch does the police officer belong to? In terms of the three, balanced, sharing of power thing.
Aren't they both judicial?
Nope. The judge is judicial, and then the police officer is executive.
Really?
Okay. Yep.
Is it for local and state as well as federal?
Yes, any officer belongs to the executive branch of the three, the balance of power, and the judge, the court, belong to the judicial part. The third part is not involved in this particular argument. It is the legislative part. Those would be your, state senators, your, assemblymen, and so on and so forth. So those people come up with the law. The officers, the police officers, are there to enforce the law, and then the judge is there to interpret the law. And as a result, hopefully, there's a balance of power, and no branch can have, more power than it is supposed to. Okay, and that's why, a police department cannot issue its own search warrant, because that would have defeated the original purpose of a balance of power. So a judge basically has to go through the application itself and see whether there is enough cause or reason to issue a search warrant, so that the executive branch cannot just say that we feel like searching this guy's house and we'll go ahead and do it anyway. They cannot. Okay. Okay, Sam suspects that his or her spouse is doing something. Okay, not gonna get into what that something is. Sam found ways, keyloggers, for example, to crack into some of the accounts of the spouse. Can Sam get into trouble for doing this?
Yes.
Anything that is password protected or require authentication suggests that privacy is a reasonable expectation, and in these cases, Sam's action can be considered an invasion of privacy, and that is a violation of the law. So even though it looks like a domestic, stuff, and the police or the law should not get into this, it does. Okay, because what Sam is doing is invading the privacy of another person. That person can be a spouse, and it still falls into the category of invasion of privacy. What about? Yep, go ahead.
I was going to say, you can't do it to your children.
You can't do it to a children only when they're still minors.
Yeah.
So once they get to 18 or there's a certain age, they become, then lawfully they become adults, and you can no longer, do surveillance on your kids, in a way that invade their privacy. Yep.
So what that's telling me also is if I set up password and set up a reasonable security on my own system, I'm not only doing it to protect my data per se, but also to set myself up for legal protection in a
Right.
court of law if I ever need to.
Unless it is a work computer, then it does not apply, because at work, basically whatever you do with company equipment has no privacy guarantee whatsoever. You can try to do anything you want. In fact, let's say, they give me a computer here at school, and it has Windows installed and with all the key logging and all the screen sharing stuff already installed, so they can monitor what I do on my computer. The act of wiping the hard drive and installing Linux can potentially get me into trouble. Because it can be considered as destruction of property, because I'm destroying the operating system that is already installed on that computer.
And most of the time, anytime you do anything on a company's piece of equipment anyways, you probably already signed a thing saying that anything you do, they have rights to it as well.
Right. That actually interesting apply, here, if anyone is taking in a programming class or participating in any project that results in programming code or any type of creative work, the college claims that they have rights to it too. Yep. So are there any questions at this point about all the issues that we have talked about? No questions? Does anyone have any war story to share? No. Okay. This part here is not entirely done. I was still kind of in the process of getting into this part here. But I found this link here that is kind of interesting. It has to do with Hecka Ethic. Okay. So the question is, what is considered a hacker, and what is considered a cracker, and so on. So a lot of these terms are used in a kind of vague way, and also what the public know about these terms may not be what we know about these terms as professionals. Okay, Hecka Ethic is a term for the moral values and philosophy that are standard in the hacker community. And the interesting part is the early hacker culture and resulting philosophy originated at the MIT in the 50s and the 60s. So it has nothing to do with what we currently know about hacking, or what we call hackers these days. Okay, so the question now is what is considered a hacker back in those days? There are quite a few links here. To basically talk about, he's gone. Eric's hero is Richard Stallman. The free software movement, which is also behind the EFF, the organization behind Privacy Badger, was born in the early 80s from followers of Hecka Ethic. Its founder, Richard Stallman, is referred to by Stephen Levy as the last true hacker. Modern hackers who hold true to Hecka ethics, especially the hand-on imperative, are usually supporters of free and open source software. So that would make most of us, using Linux, also a hacker by that definition. Richard Stallman describes the hacker ethic refers to the feeling of right and wrong, to the ethical ideas this community of people had, that knowledge should be shared with other people who can benefit from it, and that important resources should be utilized rather than wasted. Okay, so that really is kind of vague because it is also very subjective. WikiLeaks. Okay, what do you feel about WikiLeaks in terms of ethics, in terms of legality, and also in terms of is that something that is positive or negative? I mean, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. I'm just kind of bringing that up because it is definitely a controversial issue. Yep.
I mean, it's borderline treason, but I think it's good. Like,
Okay.
When I was in the Marine for signal intelligence, I had talked to your parents, but I never posted anything on WikiLeaks. In fact, it was illegal for me to look at WikiLeaks.
Right. Now, go ahead.
Oh, I said it's good if they do it responsibly and they don't invade your lives.
Okay. Anyone else?
I sided with him. I used to be in an Air Force side intelligence house, and we had similar lockdowns on information. If he was allowed access to all kinds of information under the premise that he would keep it under wraps, and he released it. So on an individual level, he broke a big law.
Right.
So
Ethically, I do like the idea that information is, I believe that some information should be free to everyone no matter what.
Okay. Say again?
For example, government did something evil and
Mhm.
people don't know about, and hackers, for example, broke into computers and stole information, and the computers fall apart.
Right. Now, okay, let me kind of present a different scenario, and then you can kind of think about that one and say, okay, well, how about this scenario? A few years ago, the Los Rios district accidentally configured PeopleSoft in a strange way, incorrect way, so that a robot like Google robot or Spider was able to crawl it and then get social security information from it. A particular student was doing a Google search of his, I believe it was his social security number using Google, and found references to it from a Los Rios, originated website. Okay, so that made it to the news. It's not a secret, at this point. What if the district, tells everyone who was involved in the case and say that, well, we have to keep this under wrap. Okay, you want to keep your job, right? I want to keep my job, so let's keep it quiet and not say a single thing. Okay, so let's say I'm one of those people in that meeting room at the time to basically say, yes, we'll all say nothing about this. Okay, and later on I decided, no, I really kind of feel like that I should share this information with other people. So I shared it with other people, and then people know about this entire incident, and they basically come back to me and say, Tech, you did something wrong. It is not right for you to disclose this information because now the reputation of the district is endangered and blah 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 blah. Okay, so what do you think of that?
I think the organization is correct because you choose to work for that organization and you need to comply with that.
Mm-hmm.
But from the organization in the world standpoint, ethically,
Right.
They did something that has potential damage for individuals. So
Right.
the organization is wrong. I mean, they're
Well,
unethical in that.
in this particular case, it is actually very clear cut that I am right, that I would be right to disclose that information, because California has laws to protect the privacy of everyone. So that means, if the social security of employees or students somehow got leaked to the internet, the institution is required by law to let people know. Okay, so in this case, not keeping it as a secret is actually illegal. that is illegal. It's illegal to keep it under wrap because it is required by law. The institution has to make this known to people involved. Like, okay, I need to let you know that your social security number might be compromised. What about the Heartbleed issue? Okay, we talked about this a few weeks ago. I think it's only about 2 weeks ago that we discovered OpenSSL has a security flaw, and any website that makes use of OpenSSL before the patch can potentially have your username and password compromised. Okay, did you guys as students receive any information from the college or from the district regarding that and say that it's probably a good idea to reset your password? You don't remember?
I didn't see anything.
You don't receive anything?
Didn't receive anything.
Okay.
I never got a single email saying anything about that from anything.
Okay, now, it is not your social security number, so it does not really fall into that particular protected category, but nonetheless, it is still a security risk and there is exposure, okay? So now it is not a matter of whether it's legal or not, or whether it's illegal, for the college or the district not to say a single thing. It is actually, whether the college or the district feels that it has the obligation to inform people and say, okay, this is what happened. We recommend that you reset your password, just to be sure, okay, just to save on the safe side. Okay, so it becomes not really a legal issue because legally I don't think they have to do it. It becomes an ethical issue of whether it really should be done this way or not. Okay, and no one get notified of anything about the OpenSSL issue that you really should reset your password. Okay. Sorry? Okay. Because what happens is when OpenSSL is compromised, if you use your username and password to sign into any website, including Moodle, that uses OpenSSL, someone else can potentially get your username and password by poking the OpenSSL server repeatedly. They can grab that information. So it is a good idea for you guys to reset your password just in case. The worst part about the Heartbleed issue is it doesn't leave a trace behind. Okay, so it's not like some kind of compromise where if you go through the server log, you can definitely tell that somebody had made use of a security flaw. In this case, there's no trace whatsoever, so we have no idea whether the server has been compromised or not. Okay, so now that you guys know about it, you should go change your password. Are there any questions or issues, so far, with all the stuff that we have talked about? Okay, the hacker ethics. And by the way, downtown Sacramento has a hacker lab. Some of you may know about it. And it really it follows these particular ethics. It's very hands-on. It is open, decentralized, and you have free access to computers. And for the most part, it is also for world improvement, which is not what you associate with the word hacker these days. If you go into Walmart right now, okay, and just pick a random person and ask that person, what do you think of hackers? Okay, what do you think the answer will be? Usually, go ahead. Hacking is bad because they're trying to break into someone's account or do something bad, but that really is not what the original term hacker refers to. What about anonymous? Okay, so I'll bring up something so that for people who do not know about the anonymous group, they are called hackivists. As opposed to activist. Let's see, I'm going to go to the Wikipedia page, which is probably kind of be contended, because it is a somewhat subjective, and we want to look up anonymous. Here we go. So this is the anonymous group. They have done several things in the past that some people associate as hacking, cracking, something certain things to be that is considered illegal. Okay. So I want to just kind of look up one particular thing that they did. Okay. There are several things that they did. In its early form, the concept was adopted by a decentralized online community, which falls into, which fits the description of hacker because it is decentralized. Online community acting anonymously in a coordinated manner, usually toward a loosely self-agreed goal. In other words, nobody is actually in charge. The entire group is saying, okay, we kind of all agree to a certain type of standard, and we all kind of agree that we should do this to respond to certain things. Beginning with 2008's Project Canology, a series of protests, pranks, and hacks targeting the Church of Scientology, the anonymous collective became increasingly associated with collaborative hacktivism, as opposed to activism, on a number of issues internationally. Individuals claiming to align themselves with Anonymous undertook protests and other actions, including direct action, in retaliation against anti-digital privacy campaigns by motion picture and recording industry trade association. Later targets of Anonymous include government agencies of the U.S., Israel, Tunisia, Uganda, and others, child pornography sites, copyright protection agencies, and so on. The list kind of goes on and on and on. So the question is, in terms of ethics and in terms of legality, what do you think of the Anonymous group? Okay, somebody nodded, but what does that mean? Go ahead.
Overall, there's certain things that they do that they believe that needs to be done, that other people won't do.
Well, they certainly bring something to the surface. Basically, they make certain things known to other people. It's like, okay, these are things that I think other people should be aware of. But some of these things that they do definitely fall into the illegal, region, because they're definitely getting into PayPal, or they're launching denial of service to many of these websites, which is actually illegal in the United States. Dozens of people have been arrested too for involvement in the anonymous cyber attacks in countries including the US, UK, Australia, the Netherlands, Spain, and Turkey. Evaluations of the group's action and effectiveness vary widely, so it's very subjective. Some supporters call the groups freedom fighters and digital Robin Hoods, while critics have described them as cyber lynch mob and cyber terrorists. That might be going a little bit too far, because a terrorist usually have a demand to make that is not for the betterment of other people; it's only for themselves. And in 2012, Time magazine called Anonymous one of the 100 most influential people / organization in the world. So that's kind of interesting because they also did something related to WikiLeaks. I believe, I cannot remember what they did. If you just kind of search in this page for WikiLeaks, leak. There we go. Anonymous has publicly supported WikiLeaks and the Occupy movement. There are other references too. In November 2010, the organization WikiLeaks began releasing hundreds of thousands of leaked U.S. diplomatic cables. So that act, of WikiLeaks, you can kind of say that it's good. You can say it's bad. It depends on whether those cables endanger operatives, overseas. Okay, because if it discloses enough information for to endanger the lives of operatives, it's not a good thing. Okay, they can bring up the issues, but without endangering the lives of other people. So it depends on the extent of these cables. Did they filter these cables that they release to make sure that no one is going to be endangered? Well, they cannot do that, okay? Because a lot of times, if they're not really in the trade, they don't know what information can be considered, dangerous or can endanger the life of other people. In the face of legal threats against the organization by the U.S. government, Amazon.com booted WikiLeaks from its servers because they were basically renting a server from Amazon AWS. Okay, and PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa cut off service to the organization. Operation Payback then expanded to include Operation Assange, and this is the name of the person who operated the WikiLeaks. And Anon issued a press release declaring PayPal a target, launching DDoS denial of service attack with the LOIC. What is LOIC?
It was an acronym for Low Orbital Ion Cannon.
Okay, that's it. That's the tool that they use to launch the attacks.
DDoS.
Yep. Anons quickly brought down the website of the PayPal blog, a Swiss financial company denying service to WikiLeaks, and so on. So that's kind of interesting, from a certain perspective, because they just basically targeted anyone who is not aligning their view with the anonymous group as a whole. It's kind of like Greenpeace, except it applies to like the digital frontier instead of whaling industry and stuff like that. So anyway, I think this really brings up the issues of legality. A lot of the things that they did definitely are illegal. Okay, but it also brings up the issues of ethical issues. Okay, is what they're doing ethical? Sometimes ethical issues are not necessarily legal, and vice versa. So there are cases of those things as well. Any questions, comments? Do you guys think the law is up to date as far as digital stuff is concerned? What do you think of the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act? Okay, so what made you make that remark? Okay, so let's take a look at the DMCA because it is definitely related to the law because the Digital Millennium Copyright Act is a part of the law. It's federal, so it applies to everyone, not just Californians. Okay, but which part of this do you think is kind of questionable? Okay, first of all, what does it do? It is one of the things, one of the part of the framework to discourage piracy. So in this case, it is known as it promotes DRM, and what does it make illegal? Okay, let me give you, fill you in with something. When you go to a store and you purchase a DVD, okay, you go to they don't sell DVDs much these days anymore, but before they still have DVD on the shelf. Let's say you go to Costco, they still sell DVDs of movies. So you go to Costco, you purchase a DVD, and you say, well, this is really a movie that I'd like to watch over and over again, and I am concerned about scratching the DVD, the original DVD. I want to make a backup of the DVD. So the first question is it legal to make a copy of a DVD that you legally purchased with your money?
Yes.
The answer is yes. Okay, so very good. Okay, it makes sense that you should be able to back up your DVD in case it is scratched up because you purchased the permission, okay, the license to basically play the DVD according to the rules. Okay, you're not supposed to play your DVD in a block party. You're only supposed to view it in private. Okay, family is okay, but if you do it, outside your house, may not be okay anymore. Okay. Okay. Next, can you just make a copy of a DVD? The answer is no. Okay, because DVDs are protected by a very simple encryption. The encryption itself is weak. Okay, it is easy to crack, but nonetheless, there is an encryption on a DVD. So no big deal. You look up on the web and say, how do I make a copy of a DVD? Tons of tools pops up. You download one of those tools, and you try to run those tools. how about the act of running one of those tools to decrypt the DVD so that you can make a legal copy of a DVD that you paid money for? That is illegal. Because the act of decrypting a DVD is circumventing a copyright protection. Okay? And according to the DMCA, the act of doing it is illegal, even though the end result is legal. So here you are, standing here, and over there is where I want to go. It is perfectly legal to go over there. But when you try to walk across, the act of walking is illegal. So how do I get to that point without, when I cannot walk over there? Transporter. Like doing it somewhere else? Send it overseas and say, make me copies. So I'm not involved in the act of doing it, but I get the copy back that is actually legal. That is how murky these things are. Okay? So the DMCA is conflicting in many ways with Copyright Acts. Okay? Because copyright actually has permission to say that if you own that thing, you can make a copy of it. It is legal. Okay? And yet the DMCA says you cannot decrypt it because the encryption is there, and you're not supposed to do anything to decrypt anything that is intentionally locked up. So that really is kind of where things are. Okay, I can just look it up and make sure that I'm not spilling vapor here. Decrypt node. Say again?
There's a little PDF on the right, the top right. That'll give you the link to the actual law.
Oh, okay.
Because this is just a Wikipedia, like.
Right. But I just want the overview of what it is.
Yeah, I couldn't find like something that wasn't.
Now, if you really want to get into even more murky stuff, look up secure computing. Okay. Now, secure computing, at least according to the name, is for your benefit. Okay? Secure computing. As a term, you can also look up the Wikipedia one. But when you look at the actual things that people or companies are trying to do, they are trying to take your PC away from you. You can buy the hardware, but it's not under your control. Now, how can they possibly do something like that? You purchase the hardware that comes with an operating system installed, mostly Windows, right? And how can they remove your control over the computer away from you? Well, first of all, they can say what you are not allowed to install. How many people have Windows 8.1 and try to install, software that is open sourced? Well, give it a try. Just try to install LibreOffice in Windows 8.1 and see what happens.
So they have a filter.
Hmm?
They have a filter, right?
They have a what?
Filter.
Filter? Yes. Because what happens is Windows 8.1 or Windows in general can basically say, I can install software, but only when it is published by one of these sanctioned, publishers. If you're trying to install anything that is not coming from one of these, sanctioned, publishers, the installer can basically say, nope, cannot do this. Now, I think in the past they would allow you to do it, but they will mark your computer as quote-unquote tainted. Now, what does that do when you have a tainted computer? Next time you try to download, something from, let's say, Netflix, Netflix can check your computer and say, is your computer pure or tainted? If your computer is tainted, then Netflix can say, well, I think you can potentially be, pirating the stuff that you're viewing over Netflix, and I would not let you view any content anymore because your computer is marked tainted just because you install LibreOffice. Okay, that's where things are going. Okay, this is where things are going. If consumers do not speak up and actually do something about it, these software publishers will seize control over your computer. It has been happening since 2008. It's just that most of us, probably do not know that these things have all been in progress ever since Windows Vista. Windows Vista was supposed to have a lot more stuff in it for secure computing to basically lock you, the owner of the computer, out of your own computer. You own the hardware, they control it.
What do they get out of controlling your hardware? They feed you ads and get money from those ads?
Well, they can ask you. Once they have control, they can do a lot of things. For instance, you can no longer own a DVD. So every time you want to watch something, you have to pay again. They can at least do that much. And they know every time you watch The Little Mermaid at 2 a.m., they know exactly when you watch it and which part of the movie you're watching too.